we're here at the Academy Sports and Outdoors Rigs and Techniques at the CCA workbench, Dave, and we've got some sharky stuff.
Well, you know, we're talking about sharks, which are really a cool animal to target here in Florida. Florida is full of sharks from one end to the other. We're in a tropical area, so, and most sharks like warm water. But when we talk about sharks, we like to use sharks as a one word that encompasses all of them, but there's more than 200 species of sharks, and they all do different things, and they all eat different things, so you use different methods to catch them for sure. You know, some sharks can really detect minute traces of blood in the water, sometimes 7 parts per million. I mean, it's amazing how a little bit of scent in the water can draw different sharks. You notice it doesn't draw always the same sharks. There's always usually a certain set of sharks that show up first when you're starting to do that, you know, putting chum out and baits and whatnot. And that's because they're all different, and they all have different, you know, all sharks are, they're so hardy that we even use them for scientific research. With all the stuff that we find out about what fish can see, a lot of it comes from sharks, because we can set them in a little tank and shock them and show them something, and shock them and show them something, and pretty soon they start blinking when we start showing them stuff, and then we can figure out what sharks can see and what they can smell and what they can eat. But when we're here, when we're going to go to try to catch them, you know, here in Florida, a good, you know, heavy spinning rod, 20-pound spinning rod will probably be just fine. You know, 50-pound braid will probably catch every shark that you encounter in Florida, unless you're offshore. You know, this would be great for
Azor 65 loaded up with the braid.
Yeah, with 80-pound braid down to 100-pound. Yeah, 65 to 80-pound braid, and you know, enough weight to get to the bottom if you need to be fishing in the bottom. It depends on where you're fishing and what kind of sharks you're fishing for. Some of the sharks will be on the bottom, and some sharks you'll be, you know, cast into, like a redfish or a trout, or even, you know, you'll sight fish them when let's say the spinner sharks or the black tips are up eating all the mullet run. You know, you're going to be up on top of them and just, you know, free lining one of the baits that you catch out of the pod, or free lining a dead bait out there when they're eating all that other bait. And it's just like regular fishing then. But you're always going to use wire because they have teeth. You know, you're going to use number 8 or number 9 wire. You can go lighter if you need to, if the sharks aren't that big. I like to use a circle hook when I'm catching a shark, and I like to use all the hooks that I'm going to use when I'm fishing for sharks are hooks that I'm planning on never seeing again. I don't like to try to get my hook back from a shark. Usually the hook is in a place that's pretty close to his mouth. Not all the time, because they'll get foul hooked a lot, but and he'll wind himself up in that leader. So you want to use a long leader. I didn't use a really long leader here, but you're going to want to use something, you know, 8 to 10 feet long usually, especially if you're catching. Yeah, correct. Especially if you're catching those spinner sharks or black sharks, or even a lemon shark. They have a tendency to spin when they get up alongside the boat, kind of like a crocodile or an alligator. When they get up alongside the boat and you get them close, they'll start spinning and winding up. And if they wind up all your metal leader and get that really rough skin on your mono, they can bust the mono with their skin. And
the same thing applies with a hammerhead, because you hook him, and more often than not, the wire goes out over the end of the hammer. Yeah. So now you're pulling him from the end of the hammer, and if you only had a little piece of wire, then what ends up happening is it wears on the monofilament, of course.
Right. Now, this is a little trick I like to use whenever I'm doing any kind of fishing with bait, and I don't want to fight the weight. I want when the fish is on, I want the weight to go away. I'll make a little loop in the leader, and I'll lay it alongside my weight, and I'll get my rubber band and just wrap it. So then when I get the bite, this thing will just pop right off. Then you'll lose the weight. But now you're fighting the fish free, which is a great thing. Now, you don't always have to use baits, like I was saying before. You can catch a lot of sharks, especially like makos. They like to eat, they're a fish-eating shark, so they like to eat moving baits. You can catch them on plugs, and trolled plugs especially. A lot of times we catch makos by accident when we're fishing for marlin on a marlin lure, because
that's how
he thinks
Colin caught his.
Yeah, you're trolling along, and there you catch, because you're using braided cable on your hook sets usually, so you end up catching a lot of sharks sharks. If you're trolling slow enough, or even sometimes fast enough with a Mako, he can swim as fast as any fish. But you know, you can always cast plugs, or which is a lot of fun, or even fly fish for sharks.
Right.
So you know, there's a ton of different ways to catch them. We have a ton of different sharks in our waters, and they're just a great fish to target.
You did good.
Just make sure you don't put them in the boat unless you're going to put them in the box.
Here we go.
Yeah.
That's good advice.
In the box.
Count your digits.
Count your digits. Make sure
I
you
didn't
have
get to
them
go
all.
on my rant.